One of the most intriguing stories in the Torah is the story of the spies. In this week's Parsha Shlach, the Torah recounts how Jewish people approached Moses. They wanted to send out scouts to see what kind of land it is, the land that they're going to be conquering and settling. And God says to Moses, send them if you want. And he chooses 12 spies, one from each tribe. And at the end of the story, of course, we all know, 10 of the tribes came back with a very slanderous report about the land, causing the Jewish people to start crying that they were going to be destroyed. Why are we going to this terrible land? And God, of course, punished the spies. They died soon after. And everyone else over the age of 20 would not live to see the promised land. Right after this story of this terrible debacle, the Torah talks about when you come into the land, you will give the first of your dough to God, which is the mitzvah of challah, that when a Jew would bake bread, they would have to take a certain portion of that dough and give it to a Kohen. Nowadays, in the diaspora especially, we don't give it to a Kohen. We're not going to go into the technicalities of why we don't do it that way, but we just burn that piece of challah, and that allows us to partake of the rest of the dough. So the question is asked, what's the reason for this juxtaposition? Of course, everything in Torah is with a purpose, with a meaning. It's not just arbitrary that the Torah follows the story, the narrative of the spies and the tragedy that it brought in its wake with the mitzvah of giving challah. There's a Hasidic Rabbi known as Rabbi Yisrael of Chartkov who gives the following explanation. This is based on his explanation. He says, when the people who were going to see the promised land, the ones who were younger than 20, they could be demoralized when they see what happened to their parents. Their parents were the people who were liberated from Egypt with great miracles, great fanfare. They got the Torah at Mount Sinai, and everything was supposed to lead to the conquest of the land of Israel, where they would implement the teachings of the Torah. And here, everything turned to nothing. It was all futile. Those people who got out of Egypt, liberated so they can have their own land, got the Torah so they can implement God's teachings, and they all died in the desert. So what makes us different? Why will we fare any different? We could also fare the same way that they did. We could degenerate somehow, we could misbehave, and then we'll be driven out of the land. So what's the point? Why do we even want to bother going there when it's fraught with so many challenges and so many pitfalls? To allay that argument, the Torah gives us the mitzvah of challah. What is the mitzvah of challah? Number one, it's to show that everything belongs to God. What motivated the spies and the people who listened to the spies and cried? What was the original motivation that they had to send the spies? They were not looking to implement God's plan of conquering the land. The spies in particular were thinking about themselves. It's all about us. We were chosen because we're smart. Moses trusts our judgment, and they're going to be excited when we come back with our analysis, and our conclusions will be embraced because, after all, if we were chosen and God didn't say no, that means we are very special, and it's true. We're all very special. But it doesn't mean that it's all about us, that everything has to revolve about our own agenda, our own career, our own advancement. And that's how the spies, and by extension, that's how the people who listened to the spies, they were not interested in conquering the land because they wanted to fulfill God's command for them to go and conquer the land. They wanted to make sure that everything is going to be fine and they're going to be successful and they're going to each have a place to live and they'll be comfortable. And if anything was going to get in the way of that comfort, they were not so excited about carrying out God's commandment. So here, the mitzvah of challah, number one, rejects that whole mindset. It's not about us. Even when we have dough and we're ready to bake bread, which is the most important staple in life, and at least in those days it was, and many other periods of history, and even today it's still very important. And then we say we give it, the first of it, we give to God. But it's not just the notion and the lesson and the message that we're giving our food to God, because God is the one who owns everything. There's another message here as well. The fact that the first of the dough, the Torah emphasizes Reishit arisosechem, the first of your dough. That means that you have to begin everything with what you give to God. And when you do that, when you start your day with a recognition that God is in charge, then you are protected for the rest of the day, even when you're not involved in spiritual and godly things, which is the reason we say Moda Ani. As soon as we wake up, we thank God. The first thought comes to mind has to be the thought that we are grateful to God. The Maggid of Mezrich, a famous successor to the Baal Shem Tov, once gave a very beautiful homily on the words of the Psalm, Psalm 63. It says over there, Elikim, God, Keliata, you are my God. Ashachareka, I will seek you. Tzamach nafshi, my soul thirsts for you, and so on. So he once translated the word Ashachareka, which means I will seek you, to mean that I praise you in the morning. Shachar is the morning. That you are my God. The first thing in the morning, you are my God. So therefore my soul thirsts for you in the morning. And as a result of that, it says later on, that even in a land of desolation, a weary land without water, I will still crave and yearn for you. That means if you start your day with a notion that I belong to God and God is responsible for everything, even if you later on confront situations that are far from spiritual, far from godly, you will be protected. Of course, there's no guarantee because we always have free choice, but that reinforces our connection to God. And therefore, the Jewish people who were destined to cross the Jordan into the promised land were told, don't think that you will fare the same as your parents, because their problem was they started on the wrong foot. Well, if you start on the right foot with the notion, the level, the mitzvah of challah, then you are guaranteed to succeed. It's interesting also that Hasidic interpretation of the Torah's words, Reshit Arisotechem, the first of your dough. The word arisa could also mean your cradle, your bed. The first thing that you do when you get out of bed should be giving something to God. And that, again, is the reason why we say Modani. We are also on the road towards the future redemption, imminent future redemption. And sometimes we lose interest because we're so accustomed to living in exile. The message over here has to be, just like those Jews who are ready to cross into the promised land had to be told that they have to begin their day to focus on their spiritual mission. The same thing, we have to start our day. The first thought has to be that we are here to bring the world to its state of perfection through the final redemption that will come through the actions of our Mashiach, our righteous Mashiach. May we see that will be fulfilled imminently.